Now we're ready to put the roof on the left section of the house and add the tower. So let's kind of talk about what's going to happen here, because some of this may not be so easy to show on the camera. Now the roof is flush on this right side, on the side that has the niche on it. The edge of that roof is flush with the edge of the building. Obviously the peaks line up at the peak. And then, do you recall that we made this 3/8 of an inch line here? Hopefully you can see that on the camera. That is what we're going to use to line up this side of the wall, so that when we put the roof on, we should see that it's going to line up with that 3/8 inch line there. And we're only going to put this side on to begin with. We're going to leave this back side unattached. We have some strips to reach in to attach it with here, here in the front, and over here at the side. So that's how we'll attach it. And you should be able to reach in from this back side to a combination of reaching in from here and reaching underneath here to get your hand in to support this. This also has an extra couple of layers of, remember we glued this to the extra chipboard there, so this strip here is supported, so we should be able to just press down on that as well. So let's pretend that the roof is installed for a moment and talk about how the tower is going to get attached. There are hinges down here on the bottom, down here and over on this side. Then we have our two long edges. And then when the roof gets installed, there's also some tabs up here on the roof that can get engaged. When we put the tower in place, and especially when the roof is on there, because this paper has words on it, you should be able to find something that you can line up to keep it straight when it gets attached over here. It should stay fairly straight because the roof will hold it, you know, pretty sturdy here. If you're not using paper that has lines that you can follow, you could draw a pencil line or somehow use a ruler to help you with that. The other thing we want to do before we put anything together permanently is just to kind of do a dry fit here. So I have the tower, pardon my head, is right up and get in that notch that we cut in the base down there. And then I'm going to take my roof, and remember it's flush over on this side. And on this other side it's going to hang over 3/8 of an inch, so let me get that situated as well. And once we do that, we shouldn't have too big of a gap. And you can see I have very little gap. There's a tiny little one right there. But if you've constructed it like I have, that should be about the size of your gap as well. Now, if your gap is bigger, we can always we're going to trim this roof out with some black cardstock. We can always run trim along the edges of, in here, like flashing on to hold the tower together. You can also see I've just got mine, it doesn't have to be on a rotating base, but I have it on something sturdy right now. so that once, I don't have it on the final board yet, but once we get this on, we'll want to make sure that we're always careful when we pick it up. So I'm going to put the tower to the side for now. And go ahead and attach my roof as we discussed. Notice I haven't taken this tab off yet. So now that I have this side and the front attached, I can remove this last piece of score tape backing up here and pay attention to my 3/8 of an inch line and engage this final part of the roof. And remember, we're not going to attach this back flap at this point. So I'm ready to put my tower in. So I'm going to go ahead and release all of my backing. And now that I have all of my score tape backing off, I'm just going to kind of press these tabs out of the way as much as possible so that nothing wants to get engaged prematurely. Now I've fit my tower into place, and so I'm going to lift up this lid and just work on making sure everything is straight. And then just work my way around and engage my score tape. I think when I bring the roof up a little bit here, I think that'll take care of that little gap that's right there. So the tower is joined and burnished and is nicely on the left house. And then we pull on the little knob here. We can open up our tower niche. Now we still have some more work to do here. We have the roof, of course, to put on over here, and there's a little entrance porch roof that's going to come in right there. But we're making progress. Now we're ready to get started on the entrance roof, and as you can see, I've got the pieces laid out in front of me. They're listed here on the bottom of page 2 in the cutting guide. We have 2 roof pieces, a roof front, a roof back, 2 roof sides, and a support piece. Now, as usual, we've got some cutting to do. We'll start here with the actual roofs. You can see I have 1 piece that's already cut. And the way we make this cut is we measure in on the bottom from the left edge 2 7/8 inches, 2 7/8 inches. And then we're going to draw a line up from that point. So I'm just going to put that mark on my cutting mat here. So that I can draw that line perfectly perpendicular. Alright, so we have that line made. And then 1 inch up from the bottom, we want to make another line. So I'm again just using my cutting mat. Now, to mark the point on this little line we just drew, we're going to measure 2 3/8 inches in from the side, from the left side, 2 3/8, and we'll make a point right there. And this final point that we made gets connected with the top right corner. So 2 7/8 to this corner, 1 inch up to this line, 2 3/8 in from the left to make this point, and then up to the diagonal corner. And then I'll make that cut, and I'll have a second piece that is just like this one. Now we're ready to do some cutting on our front piece. First thing we want to do is cut 2 roof angles, and to do that we're going to measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom up both of the sides, mark a point 1.5 inches, and then a central point here at the top. This piece is 2.5 inches wide, so that center should end up being about 1.25, and we'll connect those diagonals to get our roof angles, so 1.5 inches up on each side. And then on T2 from our templates, the last little drawing over here is the entrance, and you can see there's a circular window that gets cut here. It's 1.25 inches in diameter, and you can either center it left to right, and the center line would be up 1.5 inches, or else you can, the measurements from the bottom to the bottom of the circle are 7/8 of an inch, and because this is centered, it's 5/8 of an inch in from either side for this roof, for this opening here. So that's the front. And then for our back, we want to take this back piece and line it up directly behind the front piece that we just cut, and draw these 2 roof angles. And then we'll cut those 2 angles off. So that's our cutting done. Now we're ready to do some additional prep. So I have my 2 roof pieces here in front of me, and I've laid them out in mirror image so that I make sure that I do everything in mirror images here. So the first thing I want to do is cover these with pattern paper. So I'll do that. So I have my 2 roof pieces covered with pattern paper, and now I'm going to join them in the center with a cardstock joining strip. Then we'll add joining strips to the inside on these 2 angled edges. And then finally we'll draw a line 1/4 inch in from this front edge. We'll be using that line to help us align our roof with the walls. So that's the prep for the roof piece. So for our front, you can see I've covered it with score tape. I just found it easier just to cover the whole thing with score tape. And then I've cut a piece of pattern paper, and this paper is cut 3 5/8 inches. Well, it's basically 3 5/8 inches square. And then I scored it on the 2 side edges at 1/2 inch, and I added some score tape here. And then like our other side walls. This has been cut so there's a little bit of play in here, 1/8 of an inch. Excuse me. And so when we adhere the roof, when we adhere the front piece here, we'll make sure that we've got a 1/16 of an inch of that play on either side of these side walls. So I'll go ahead and get that stuck down. So I have my pattern paper adhered. I've cut out the circle here in the inside and I've inked around those edges, and then I'm going to ink on this top edge and the bottom edge, including the tops and bottoms of these little tabs. And then I've also prepped for adding a window here. This is one of the windows that we made at the beginning. And I have a little piece of trim that I created by cutting out a 1 1/4 inch circle here and then a 1 1/2 inch circle, just using 2 circle dies. So now we're ready to join our 4 walls together, and I'll just flip the front here to one side. Of course, we'll join a side on each side and then the back wall. And we'll just ignore these 2 little flaps, and this will just be butt joints in between these, and then we won't put it into, we'll just do it to this stage first. So now that we have the 4 walls in a row here, we're going to add some joining strips along the tops of the side walls, this angled cut, and just 2 little ones back here on the back wall. We don't need one at the top. So I have all of my joining strips attached to the top here, and I've made sure to burnish them well. So now we're ready to put the tower roof onto the tower, and you'll want to look at your roof and see, are there sides that look that you like, how they look better than other sides, and of course those would be the ones you would want to put towards the front. Now when we put the roof up here on top of the tower, what's going to happen is it's going to get attached to the stationary side here, and it will not get attached to this side that moves. So when we put this up here, we'll of course want to get it centered, all the edges overlapping, overhanging equally. And once you have it that way, just kind of put a little pressure on it as if it would be glued to the back side, and then see, does the front open if you're doing that? Or is there any rubbing going on? Now if you have any rubbing, remember we have another, we put half of this as a shim underneath the back side of the tower, and we reserved this half so that if we are getting rubbing, we could use this as a shim up here on the top. Now if you need a little bit of a shim but not quite that much, you could always trace this piece onto lightweight chipboard and use lightweight chipboard instead. And if you do, just make sure you blacken all the edges, especially this front one, but all of them, so that you won't be able to, it won't be so noticeable. So once you've determined whether you need a shim or not, and you've got that shim in place, then we'll want to attach the roof. And we'll attach the roof by putting a combination of score tape and wet glue just on this this part that doesn't move. So I have my score tape and a couple places I can put some wet glue. So I'll remove my backing. Put some glue on. Then I'll make sure I have my roof centered when I put it on. And then I'll put it on and apply some pressure to this back side. And I'll just hold that pressure for a few minutes until I know everything is engaged. So now that we've got everything attached that we need to attach to the left house, we can go ahead and put the back roof down. I've just removed the score tape backing here, and when I put it down, I'll remember that this edge on my left right here needs to stay flush with the side of the house. We have a 1/4 inch line over on my right here that we can use if need be. So, and then I'll just can reach in through the lid here and secure the score tape to the roof.